All right, let's go ahead and get kicked off. Thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is George Brooks, and I'm one of the founders here at Crema. We're a digital product agency based in Kansas City, and we get the joy of building, both designing, building, launching, and supporting software projects for companies around the world. Our kind of purpose statement is that we get to use creativity, technology, and culture to help individuals and organizations thrive. So if you want to learn more about Crema, go check out crema.us. You've probably seen our brand a little bit. If you signed up for this webinar, maybe you did a little bit of searching on who we were. So thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited about this topic, measuring the return on investment of your software projects. Everybody wants to know they're going to get the return off the investment that technology takes. But I'm excited. So I'm George, but we have another guest with us today, the star of the show, I think. We've got Nate Olson, the Director of Sales here at Crema. Nate, thanks for being with us today. Thanks for walking us through this conversation.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. Let's get started.
Cool. Well, let's review a quick agenda here for today. We're going to take about 35 minutes. This should be a pretty quick conversation, just kind of walking you through how we think about return on investment. And this is based off some things that Nate has written and things that we've experienced ourselves. At the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. There is a Q&A box on your Zoom, or there should be, where you can drop in questions, and I'll be looking for those. If you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer them. If we can't answer them, we'll follow up and make sure that we follow up after the Zoom call to answer them as well. So be sure to take advantage of the Q&A. Okay, Nate, we decided to do a webinar about return on investment of software. Where have you heard this story before?
Well, it's really been an ongoing conversation for the last 6 years at Crema. Pretty much every week I've been talking to small businesses, enterprises, startups all across the country. And they always ask, what is it going to take to build and actually support? How do we think about getting a return on this investment? What are the factors that go into total cost of ownership and actually generating some type of return from these really big investments? So I thought, why don't we just boil this down to a webinar so we can talk about some of the high points. One of the things I do want to talk about real quickly, just as a disclaimer, as George said, for the last 11 years, we've been designing, building, and deploying products for companies. We're not investment bankers or accountants or trying to be venture capitalists in any way when it comes to this type of stuff. So I want to start with that disclaimer. The other disclaimer is the vast majority of businesses out there are not software as a service companies. So sometimes you'll hear that term SaaS. This conversation today isn't really for SaaS companies, because in a SaaS company, the measurements are going to be different. Without the technology, there wouldn't really be a business. And so this is really targeted more towards a larger slice of the pie, especially in our country. These are high-end service companies, insurance companies, healthcare companies, transportation and logistics companies. So this is how companies should think about their technology investments. So that's just a disclaimer for today. And yeah, let's keep going. It's a very common story. And with that, George likes to say, technology is eating the world. And the reality is any industry needs technology in it. I can't, especially today, I mean, in a COVID environment, companies are transforming so quickly and they are heavily reliant on technology. And so George, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to this, but there are so many different ways that technology are powering these companies. It virtually touches every piece of a business.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We kind of made just a preliminary list here, but the list could go on, and you could splice it 1,000 different ways. But the reality is, and if you're on this webinar, you know it, technology, software, data is the way that we run our companies today. Whether you are in a small business and you just need to manage your point of sale, or if you're all the way into an enterprise and you're managing thousands of people as a workforce, you're going to be affected by technology. And we get to really spend a lot of time with our clients figuring out where's the right place to move the needle, to invest, to spend, where you might be able to see some type of return or to actually see some efficiencies gained. But these are just some examples. I mean, I just skimmed through here: customer support, electronic records, security, marketing tech, 3D printing, turning off the lights in your office. Everything is connected now to the internet, to software. And as you all know, it's touching every part of your business. The question is where will you invest that'll actually move the needle in that business? So Nate, I want to cue it up here. What are some of the factors when we start thinking about the actual return on investment conversation? What are some of the factors people need to calculate the ROI of software investment?
Yeah, we're going to unpack that over the next couple slides. I think one of the craziest things as I have these conversations with companies, again, of all sizes and all different industries, is we need to set a baseline. So how are you spending money today in your business? And it's really amazing. As you start asking people, okay, well, we have about 40 employees that do this one thing, or we have, large software licenses with companies like Salesforce or Microsoft that cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions per year. As you start calculating the multifaceted costs, it really starts to add up. And then as you start weighing, well, do we like this experience? Does it actually work for our business? Is it operationally sound? Are we utilizing it for all of its capabilities? We start to find some holes pretty quickly. So step one is you need to set a baseline. And for everyone who is on the webinar today, it's going to look different for every business. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, George. Here is a preliminary list of things. Go ahead and snapshot it or jot some of these things down. But we're about to enter Q4 of this year. I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about budgets. This would be a really good time to take stock of where you're spending money on your current operations of your business, just for how it's functioning. So headcount and salaries. That's probably going to be your biggest item. For most businesses, this is what we see as being true. Licenses, like I said, companies like Salesforce or NetSuite, or if you have some type of big software license, those are big annual expenses. Third-party services, again, technology, that's something we could talk a lot about, third-party services, but they power a lot of the software that's built, and a lot of time they are on a pay per use. So as those scale, the costs scale. Training, internal training, marketing, reskilling, DevOps, security, compliance, maintenance, outside vendors, legal, the list goes on. So step one is take a baseline. Where are you at? What are you spending money on just for your business unit to operate?
Now, I'll add to that. One of the things that you need to be thinking about is that this isn't just about what you're spending, a month-to-month basis or even over a year, but you've kind of talked about the fact that you might want to multiply that on a real potential return on investment time frame. So what does that look like?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, George. Calculate this number. What are you spending as a baseline per year? And then just multiply that out by 3 to 5 years. Because as we start thinking about where could software really help improve our operations, create new revenue lines for us, create some prestige and some competitive advantage for us, you start to go, well, we're already spending $5 million a year on a process that nobody likes, that isn't scalable. And over the next 5 years, we're spending $25 million. Is that a good use of resources and time? Man, I have this conversation all the time and everyone's eyes light up and go, man, we're already spending $10 million, $50 million. I've seen it all over the board. And what we have isn't very good. People don't like it and it doesn't really work for us. So that is where the conversation starts. And George, you and I were talking like, what kind of software could you build between, $0 and $30 million? Well, wow, you could do some incredible things for a fraction of the cost. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about as we go out throughout this webinar.
Yeah, and just to echo this, as you start to think about adding this all together, you may think, well, I'm only just going to think about my license, and then I'll times that by 3 to 5. No, add all of these things up in your budget line item. So what's that total staff count? How many hours are they spending a day? What are you paying them in the salary, and break it down to that time? Because we know, one of the biggest expenses, like you said, Nate, is people. And we see a lot of teams that they go, well, I'm just going to throw bodies at it. So I'm just going to throw more people at the problem, and ends up being this really bloated team of people who are doing really manual work with, like you said, antiquated software that they bought off the shelf. So they're paying a license fee, and they're into tens of millions of dollars in investment for something that half the time the team that's actually assigned to it isn't even using the software they have a license for. So yeah, totally just want to echo that. I think this is a great baseline. So what are the potential returns? Where will actually people see returns if they invest into creating their own software solutions?
Yeah, and again, all of this varies business to business. This is primarily, there's kind of three buckets here. So I like to use a triangle because it's easy, but the first place to look is revenue gains. So a lot of companies will say, okay, the way we're operating right now doesn't scale. How can we put software in place that allows us to scale and create net new revenue off of our current existing team or headcount? So let's spend a minute here on revenue gains. So sometimes that can be viewed as competitive advantage. Talk to a lot of companies that are in the second or third spot as far as the market goes. They are market leaders, but they want to overtake a potential competitor. Well, software and technology is a way to get competitive advantage and grow market share. Net new revenue. This could either be by being able to do more existing projects. Like if you're a large engineering firm, maybe you could take on 2 to 3 more projects per year with the same staff that you couldn't take on before, and that could amount to tens of millions of dollars of new revenue. Winning more customer accounts. Again, technology is so important. Companies are thinking about how do we engage with our customers, especially in this new environment where 50% of the US population is working from home. On the B2B side, customers need easy tools to actually engage. Winning customer preference and evangelism. This is a huge one, especially among consumer companies. If you have a great product, people talk about it. And so technology is a big piece of that. And then increase customer LTV, lifetime value. So actually growing share of wallet for your customers. So there are a lot of ways to get new revenue gains by being operationally efficient, by building really great software. And again, we're being general right now because every business is totally unique. The other bucket where it's probably obvious, we've been talking about operational improvements, but this is the bucket, operational improvements, where we could talk about increased understanding of customer needs. We meet a lot of companies that are collecting data from customers, but they don't actually use it. They don't understand their customers. So what could it mean if we understood our customers better? How do we standardize project workflow and deliverables? Again, I think about insurance companies, engineering companies, large consultancies, cybersecurity companies that work on these big service engagements. Well, every project looks different. If they're doing completely unique things, they waste a lot of time and money on overhead just to execute these projects. So what would it look like to standardize them? A big piece of this is also decreasing the amount of times there's repetitive mistakes. So across big companies, sometimes mistakes will happen over and over and over again because the process isn't very strong, breaks down under scale. And so technology can be a piece of that oversight. Rapid adaptation in minutes. So what used to take months to change your current system could change in minutes if you had better technology. Analytics, data, you get it. There's a lot of ways that software can improve operations. And although you may not get rid of headcount per se, or that headcount might shift on other projects, this will actually improve the amount of projects you can take on. The third bucket is intangible value. And I talk to a lot of CEOs, C-suite and VPs, and said, what value does peace of mind have? Like it's kind of hard to put a number on it, but if projects are breaking, if you don't have the oversight, if you don't feel like you have confidence in your technology approach, then you could, obviously worry about those things. And so I think about, what is brand value and prestige worth? What is it worth to become the #1 leader in the market? It could be worth a lot. What does it look like to have checks and balances on your team and have confidence in your technology plan? How do you minimize recurring issues, peace of mind, confidence, and awards and recognition? So these don't necessarily have a dollar value per se, but they are a piece of the returns when we start talking about software investments. George, anything to add on this?
No, I think this is just what we're trying to get at, is there's so many different areas that obviously you can get a return, both from a new line of revenue, really positioning your company the right way, from an operational efficiency way, which I think is a lot of our clients tend to think about that piece, but also this intangible piece. And I think I love that you threw in the intangible values, because honestly, we make most of our decisions, we move most of our companies forward on emotion, on gut. And with technology, we're not going to take the gut and the emotion out of it, but we want to supplement that with the ability to better understand, have greater confidence in what your people are doing, how we're working, the decisions that you're making, the data that's being made on, and software can bring all that to the table. So lots of areas to improve.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of these companies are moving from, like, they've literally pushed Excel to its limits.
That's right.
I don't.
How many companies have we seen that have been like, I don't think I'm allowed to add another row or another column to this table? Not true, but like you get what we're saying, is that they're getting it to the limits of what it really isn't useful for that tool to do that anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what does it take then to actually achieve that ROI?
Yeah, well, I think this is where we educate a lot. And I'm glad we're having this webinar because it's worth talking about. I think a lot of people who aren't familiar with what it takes to build really good software and to support it and get it out into the market, it takes a lot more than just a developer. I think a lot of people go, well, I'll just get a developer, or, we have a developer on our team, he'll just do it.
Right.
Well, I think the reality is we talk about, it takes a cross-collaborative team that is made up of front-end and back-end developers. So if you don't know what that is, it's worth Googling. There's a big discipline difference between front-end developers who create all the UI, everything that someone would interact with, and back-end developers who are building all the APIs and systems, the database structures that power the actual application. You're going to need a designer. A lot of companies skip this and they just have engineers that start building, and then everybody's worked with a tool that's been built by an engineer. I think I say it once a week where I'm like, wow, this looks like an engineer built it.
No offense against engineers. We love our engineers.
Nothing against engineers. We love them.
We all have our forte. Yeah.
Yeah. We have more than half our team is made up of engineers. But the designers are really the ones that make it great to interact with. And design is usually the first step. Test engineers. How do we test our code? How do we make sure that it's quality before we push it out, so we're not pushing out buggy code? And I do say that with the caveat that when things get out into the market or out into your organization and people are using it, it will break. That is software. It will break in ways we couldn't have.
No one could have predicted. Yep.
Exactly. So test engineers. A product manager or product owner. You might not need both roles, but this is kind of a new one. I think a lot of organizations, especially larger ones, go, oh, a project manager. And it's like, no, it's actually it's not a new field, but a product manager who manages the day-to-day operations of the project, who's
the business
really
value, the roadmap, the long-term plan, et cetera.
Exactly. Sales and marketing, of course. Let's talk about an internal tool. People are pretty resistant to change, especially when the world is changing a lot. And so going, hey, we have this new tool, you have to use it, is not a very good plan, especially for rollout. So I think engaging and educating and reskilling your team to actually use some of these tools is definitely a long investment. It'll take 4 to 6 months to actually get your team really using it on a regular basis. And then George, you want to talk about DevOps and SecOps? It's really just about security.
Yeah. Well, and this is a space that's been around for a long time. It's changed pretty drastically in the last few years, but the DevOps and SecOps space is we're just seeing those worlds merge pretty quickly. And what we're talking about there is, where does the software live? Traditionally, in an enterprise or even in a small business, they would have a little server in the closet. We know that's no longer the case for most organizations. They've moved their software into the cloud. That's kind of table stakes now. It's a given. But there's still management that goes into, how do we scale that up as more people use it? How do we distribute those servers across multiple geographic areas? And then, of course, it's 2020. You have to secure it in some way. And it doesn't going to be able to be 100% secure. We've seen the top organizations in the world still struggle with that. But following the right policies, adhering to the right protocols, help you to really think through those SecOps. But Nate's point here is that it's not just a dev or someone being pulled off another project to say, hey, go make this thing for me, so that we can, make a 100x return on our investment here. Instead, you really have to think about really what this is a startup team, a tech team, an innovation team, a small cross-functional team. And these little teams of 4 to 5 people can produce some incredible results.
Yeah, so I think one of the other things when it comes to building software, so we're talking about organizations that may be incredible at delivering high-end services like cybersecurity consultants or engineering firms or insurance firms. They often don't have these roles because they don't view themselves as a technology company yet. And I say that yet because I'm trying to convince every company that they need to embrace technology. But expenses to plan on, again, staff, either hiring a team eventually at some point, 4 or 5 engineers. We all know software developers, get paid quite a bit. And sorry, got an animal coming over here.
The joys of doing webinars from home.
I know, the joys. I'm human. Yeah, so, okay, I think he's gone. So staff or an agency, again, this is the model that we work under. You can hire a team to do this. Eventually, that won't be the sustainable route to go. You will want to eventually hire your own team. So that will be a cost that even maybe you are eliminating some roles that you don't need to, continue to scale someone who just copies and pastes, data, but you're going to need to replace that person with potentially a developer. So again, that's probably going to be your biggest expense. Reskilling and retraining staff. This is a big one right now. We have a lot of people learning how to work in different ways than they've worked in the past. It takes time, it takes internal investment. While people are learning their new skills, you're probably going to have decreased productivity. It's something to think about. So that does come at a cost to the business and hopefully for a good return. Software tools, again, third-party services, hosting. These start out pretty minimal, and then as a product scales, if you're a company and you put 50,000 employees on a new tool that you built, it can get pretty expensive pretty quickly. Security, making sure that you abide by standard security, or maybe you're a healthcare company and you need to invest in a HIPAA audit or something like that. Every industry is a little different, but there's some expense to ongoing compliance. I mentioned lost productivity. There is a little blip of lost productivity, and then as adoption starts to go up and people really start to flourish, that's a really exciting point to see.
And we'll cover that in a second. Okay, so we've covered the fact that obviously technology is affecting every part of the organization. You've talked about the fact that there are multiple ways to actually potentially realize that return. Where will you actually make money or save money or position your company better to maybe move the needle for the whole organization? And then we just touched on costs, right? So the potential cost to actually invest into technology is not just hiring a dev to go do it, or even just outsourcing it overseas and saying, show it to me in 3 months. Instead, there really is a need to invest into a full stack technology organization mindset. So given those pieces in play, how do you actually calculate your return on investment?
Yeah, it's nuanced. So we're painting with broad strokes here. And again, I think some of these categories will apply here in this equation for your company. All of them might apply, maybe only 2 of them might apply. It really depends on the scenario. But let's talk about projected revenue. So we talked about, okay, will we be able to take on 1 or 2 new projects because of the software? So there's some potential ability to take on key accounts, or maybe there's a new business model. This allows you to deliver a new service. So you're going to have some revenue projections here. So you add that up, do the best that you can, and you come up with your projected revenue number. The operational improvements.
I'm gonna stop you for just a second, Nate. I think you just said something really important. Some of these things are assumptions. You're gonna have to make some educated assumptions on what you think the potential could be. But that's okay. You'll prove that out, and as you move forward, you'll learn more. But putting it down on a piece of paper actually is really powerful. So keep going. I wanted to call that out. That's really smart that you're making some guesses, you're making some assumptions here, but you'll continue to measure that as you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Operational improvements. This should be pretty clear, especially if you know, like if you're an engineering firm and you know it takes 5,000 man hours to get out a project on a power plant or something like that. And you know consistently that's kind of what it takes. Well, if you can do it in 4,500 hours, there's an operational improvement there and some savings. So I think most service companies would know, like, what does an average project look like? How much time do we invest in it? How much headcount? So these numbers should be pretty clear. And it's extensive. It could span, I've talked to some companies, 15 or 20 roles that touch a project. Calculate that. That's part of the baseline. So how can we get gains and on how many projects? Cost reductions, we talked about that. It may be cost reductions and also cost shifts. So you might move headcount from one area over to another. But we should look for what are the cost savings of doing this. Maybe we're more efficient across all of our projects. And then the intangibles. There is some value to brands. We know that brands have value. We know that brand prestige has value. What would it mean to be number one in the industry? Only you can answer that, or maybe the CEO of your company can answer that, but that does have some value. So those are all the areas where we can gain. Then we need to divide it by the costs. So obviously we talked about staffing or an agency. You're going to have expenses for that. The ongoing costs related to the software. So again, that's third-party services. To some extent, it's hosting, it's audits, it's all the things that make it a reality under the technology piece. And then if it's an outward-facing piece of technology, so it's going to your B2B customer or B2C customer, there's marketing and sales related to that. You can't just launch it and expect people to show up. And then I put education, because sometimes a lot of this software is just internal software that allows you to work better, and that takes education in the form of reskilling and retooling. So we can go all the gains divided by all the costs, and then with a caveat on a 3 to 5 year timeline. Software changes so quickly. This is an important little aside. I wouldn't project out further than 5 years, because our industry has changed dramatically in 5 years. And by the time, we get to 2025, the world is going to look so different, and the needs of the organization are going to be so different. So I would plan on 3 to 5 years, just depending on your organization and industry. So here's a easy example. I just used round numbers, but this is pretty similar to some projects that I've quoted recently where we've kind of calculated some of these things. So projected net new revenue, hey, we're going to take on $2 million worth of new projects that we couldn't take on before due to our efficient processes and our investment in this tech. It's going to cost us, or cost reductions, about $1 million a year. We're paying, this huge licensing fee to these other companies. We're going to get rid of that and build our own. We're going to have, a really great software solution that we're home growing as opposed to buying from one of these large companies. So we'll be able to eliminate $1 million in cost. Operational improvements. We're going to see $2 million a year in just operational improvements. And again, some industries, it's fascinating. I love engineering because it's really interesting. Like if a project changes, like if you pour the wrong cement on a giant high-rise building, do you know how expensive that is to actually change? Or potential lawsuits or other things like that. So if we can use software to eliminate risk in projects, well, that's a huge operational improvement. And so for one of these companies, like there were $30 million a year worth of issues that just happened.
Error reductions. I mean, just
error reductions. Exactly. Thank you. So again, I'm just saying $2 million a year in potential improvements there for oversize and error reductions. And then total estimated annual return, add all those things up, it's $5 million a year times 5 years. Maybe that's not exactly right because it takes time to actually build that up. But you could do that for 3 years and you could come up with an educated guess on your potential return. So I did times 5 years, $25 million divided by what does it cost? Salaries, staff, the technology, everything. Let's say the 5-year estimated cost is $6 million. It's costing you like $1.2 million a year to actually build and deploy it, support it. You can see there's a return of like 4x. Again, this is just putting some numbers, bringing them to life instead of just providing a formula. Every business is going to look different. Some businesses might have multiple lines of projected revenue, multiple lines of cost reductions. And some companies might not even want to realize, what a error reduction could mean or, lowering risk in a project. That's fine. That's up to your company to do. George, anything else to add?
No, I think there's a good point here about the fact that, a lot of companies invest into building and equipment and other capital expenditures, but they often, only now in the last few years are we seeing people now put software at the front of the line for the investments they're going to get return on. Even more so now because of COVID, right? Because we're going remote and software now runs everything in our organizations. The 4.2x return is just an example, and the models can get far more sophisticated as you start to splice them out. But the reality is, again, what you're trying to do is build a case for whether or not you should or should not invest. And there are times when this will not end up getting you a return. And when you do the math, you go, this is an area that maybe we can wait on. Maybe we do buy off the shelf, or maybe we go a different route. Doing a simple math problem like this will help you to at least evaluate, is this the right investment right now? Can we take the risk to invest that piece? And do we understand that it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? That this is something we're going to do over the period of a long period of time, multiple year projects to make software a key piece of our business. And so I think when you think about 4.2x return, go to a technology startup, right? Like name LinkedIn or Facebook or something. They're even looking that one of the reasons they have to raise so much capital is they're investing even more to scale at these like astronomical levels. Most organizations aren't going to need to operate at that level of scale. So they don't need to go from having, 10 engineers to 400 engineers overnight. Most organizations can keep their teams small, keep that cost relatively speaking down while they move the product forward, iterate, seek feedback, and build something that, of course, their internal and external users actually really want. So that return could go up even more.
Definitely.
All right, big question. Are people ready for this? What does it take to be ready for this? I think one of the things that we talk a lot about, and you've mentioned already, is that every company needs to be thinking about being a technology organization. And I know that sometimes it's hard to argue for that. If you are in an industry that says, we're in manufacturing or we're in maybe a hardware space, tech just doesn't really move the needle for us. And I literally have had the conversation with people that says, yeah, all this is great. I know I probably need an innovative culture. I know that I probably need a technology team, but honestly, I'm making money and I like playing golf on Thursdays. And so a lot of people just aren't ready for the commitment to step into being a technology company and seeing the change that it would take to actually do it. I wanted to walk through real quick just a couple things that you need to consider. We're over on time, so I'm going to go quickly here. First off, this is going to take time. Most people paint the picture that it's a line or a hockey stick up, right? You're going to invest X right up front, and maybe you still continue to spend, but that line is just straight up and to the right. You're going to start seeing returns immediately. This is what the business actually thinks it is. In reality, it's more like this. And this is actually similar to an innovation curve for a startup, but it's almost the exact same. We see it in enterprises of all sizes. The reality is you spend up front, you then keep spending, and then you now start to actually release some products. You start to get some things out, and you start getting small wins. You can see small wins in the course of weeks or months, not years, but you're still investing at that point. You don't get the full return. You might have little moments of validation where it actually moves the needle. You actually see a bump in productivity or efficiency, or maybe there's a new project that comes through and you make some money off of it. But there's a spot in between, and there's lots of different organizations that call it different things, but we'll just refer to it as the trough. The question for most organizations is, will they endure the patience and the investment to survive through this trough? So it's similar to investing in the stock market, right? There will be ups and downs in the market. The question is will you invest and keep your investment in place long enough to see the long tail return in it? And this is a space where you're mostly dealing with the fact that people don't want to adopt your software because they don't like change. You're trying to do change management inside your organization, or you're running into some technical issues. You're hitting the reality that now rubber hits the road. And when a rubber hits the road, there's a friction that takes place, and it's hard. So we do say, expect this. Expect there's going to be a dip in productivity. There's going to be a dip in maybe what you view as results. It's not always going to be up and to the right. But if you can be patient enough to continue to invest, continue to listen to your users, get feedback, to continue to measure your spending, you'll start to see that return come up on the other side. So that involves refinement, iterations, and like I said, change management. And sometimes it's just patience and grit. The companies that we've seen succeed get through that trough. The ones that just end up losing that whole first initial investment are the ones that just gave up when they didn't see the immediate return. They were expecting something to give them a 10x return in the course of days or weeks or months, when in reality, this is a multi-year initiative.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about in preparation for this is there's a huge difference between seeing results and seeing a return, like a financial return, because in software, you can see results very quickly. I mean, you could potentially see in just a couple months, you could, be seeing results and effectiveness, but it takes time to actually see these results. And just because you're not seeing the financial gain, that's where we see companies get really timid and then pull out, and then, they lose a bunch of money, frankly.
Yeah.
You have to endure, and usually the actual ROI comes at a hockey stick at some point. Yeah. Again, within that time frame. It takes time to do this. So
totally.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll say is that this is not just about software. We're in the business of people. We just happen to build software. And in order to build great software, you really do need to consider all aspects that go into creating a technology organization. So that involves technology, people, cultural changes. So the ability to kind of let go and give autonomy to the team to move fast. And it's often that these things are required for what the industry calls digital transformation, right? It's around people, process, and technology, right? So all three of those things need to be in play. So as you start talking to your leaders, if you're a leader yourself, don't be just thinking, well, software will solve all my problems. Instead, you really need to be thinking like software is a tool that will help my people to solve better problems. And what we try to do is help people think about, okay, great. So what's the tool that's going to help people quickly enough that you start getting those results like Nate just talked about? So as you start creating a culture, it may look different than your core business culture. So if your business, again, is in manufacturing or engineering, there may be a different culture in the core product line than there is in the technology group that you're running either inside your company or that you're partnering with outside your company. They may operate in a slightly different way than you manage your company currently. That's okay. Be willing to take that risk to understand that things are going to be a little bit nuanced in the way that technology moves, the speed at which it moves, the speed at which it changes. And that's going to go into, again, that grit and patience to survive actually seeing the potential return. Okay, so how do you get started? We're going to wrap it up here and then get some Q&A. If you have any questions, drop them into the question section, Q&A section of the Zoom. I'd love to answer those questions for you. But Nate, what are some other areas to consider real quick as we're gathering data and proof to pitch?
Yeah, so a lot of people view, oh, these technology investments are super risky. What if it goes wrong? Well, there are ways to de-risk building software.
Right.
And so why don't we go ahead and just skip to slide 23 for time.
Yep.
So I just wrote a big article on this. I would encourage you to go read it. You can find it at Crema on our blog. The biggest thing is we need to align this initiative toward your quarterly and annual goals. Businesses think in quarters and years, and this is a big project, especially if we're talking about investment of 3 to 5 years worth of, money and effort and people, and there's lots of different ways that you're going to be investing. So we need to align it towards goals. You need to gain executive buy-in and team buy-in. So instead of top down, hey, we got this new tool for you, go use it. That is not a very successful approach. It's, hey, we're thinking about replacing this tool. We'd like to hear from you, and how can we ensure this will be a success? People will tell you. Do your due diligence on your solution, again, by calculating the potential returns and all the ways that you're going to be investing and what the ongoing costs are going to be. This is doing due diligence on them. And you always have options. You could buy something off the shelf, build something, or do nothing, which is always an option. Mm-hmm. You can build a prototype to gain feedback. That's hugely critical. It's a big part of our process we put everyone through. Iterate in design, not code. A lot of companies start building their first idea and then they end up building the wrong thing. I mean, imagine building a big building and then going, no, I want that room over there. It's not a perfect analogy, but way easier to do in the design phase than it would be in the actual build.
Yeah.
Utilize high leverage solutions. Not everything has to be custom. Go find great tools out there and use third-party services to get things out there quickly and validate. Choose really good technology partners. Again, do your due diligence, talk to their clients and former clients. Set clear metrics. A lot of companies set metrics, then they move them, and then your project gets canned because they moved the goalpost. Well, that's not very fair. We need to set metrics that we can hold everybody to. Measure your ROI on a 3-year timeline. Internal, external education and training. We talked a lot about that. And probably the biggest one is emphasize learning over perfection. Are you listening to how people are using the products and customers are using it? That's going to help you de-risk a lot of this, is get it in front of people, get people actually using it and listen to them. So there's lots more goodies there, but we're running a little behind. So let's open up for Q&A.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, the question we have for you is are you going to be ready to invest in this way to actually see those returns? I'm going to leave this screen up here. Take a screenshot or write down Nate's email address. And my email address is george@crema.us as well if you have any questions for me. But Nate's going to be your point of contact for any questions about Crema. Love to know if you have any questions to wrap this up. Are you trying to convince somebody to invest in technology in your organization? Are you in the process of doing it yourself right now? Where are you seeing returns? Have you already been through it yourself? Would love to answer any questions that you might have. Nate, one of the things that I thought about as we were going through this content is the ways that we'll see technology impacting businesses are getting even more sophisticated as well. So we talked about efficiency gains and maybe better communication platforms or better inventory management, things like that. But the reality is once you have that baseline in place and you continue to invest and you continue to find even further returns, you're going to start thinking about things like machine learning or artificial intelligence or ways that the actual software can start making decisions faster. Because a lot of the things that software does is helps you to make decisions faster, reduce the errors in your decisions, better know the data that's impacting your business. And now we have, the ability to actually see software doing some of that on our behalf, not just purely giving us the buttons and levers to push and pull.
Totally. I mean, I think one of the most exciting things that I talk to companies about is, okay, if we're starting in 2020 or realistically 2021, we need to skate to where the puck is going. Right. We're talking about how is the software solution going to be living and breathing in 2025. And things are changing so quickly. I mean, right now we're rolling out 5G like everywhere, right? So much of internet traffic and the way people are interacting with technologies through the phone. I think that will continue to persist. And yeah, there's just a lot of things that we're thinking about. Like if we can eliminate humans needing to actually do something and enable some of the decisions and logic to happen through the software, it's really powerful.
Yeah. Okay, so we did get a question here. ModeStack asks, what industries do you think are better at thinking of themselves as more tech companies, more early adopting industries? Or what do we think, what are some of the industries that actually have made this decision sooner, maybe some of the lagging industries that we see?
Oh, it's a great question.
I would say off the bat, we've seen quite a bit happening pretty quickly in fintech. Because you're working at such a large set of data, thinking about financial information is it needs the computer to process a lot of that information. So fintech has been a big space for us that we've seen move pretty quickly, whether that's in, tax preparation or in banking. That being said, the smaller the organization, it seems to be there's a pretty wide gap between how far the people are behind the big players. And it's the huge advantage that they have to kind of own that market because of their technology. That's the first one that pops into my head. What are others, Nate, that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I know this isn't maybe the answer that you want, but I think it's happening everywhere. Especially, I mean, there are so many industries that haven't changed in 100 years.
Yeah.
Truly. I think about construction, engineering and architecture, logistics and transportation. I mean, it's not like the trade is changing because, engineering has kind of always been engineering, but it's now how do we facilitate that happening? How do we work in smarter ways and better ways? And so I'm seeing it in a lot of areas. I think honestly, I mean, some of the more regulated industries are really difficult to change. I mean, like healthcare, I would love to say, because there's constant innovation in healthcare. But from a technology perspective, it's really hard. I'm trying to think of other regulated industries, but yeah, it really varies. And I'm sure there are innovative companies in, healthcare. We've worked with some of them, but they're usually carving out a little niche for themselves. And that's
I would say the thing that I think we see more, rather than a particular industry, it might be a particular slice of the organization. So for instance, marketing tech obviously has been huge. We've seen kind of marketing tech take off with tools like Salesforce or with investment into different CRM options and automated marketing platforms, things like that. As well, I think, I lost it. Nope, I'll come back to it. I'll think of it here in a second. It's a great question. Marketing tech and communications is another piece that we're seeing a lot of investment into is HR, that's it. So HR solutions, honestly, HR solutions has been a pretty core piece of Crema's business over the last 3 to 5 years, building both for hiring platforms, recruiting platforms, onboarding platforms for HR departments, how to understand the skills that you already have in your organizations and how they can, you can do professional development as people grow. Those are the types of decision-making that happens at scale when you start thinking about larger organizations. Well, I want to be respectful of time. We're about 5 minutes over. Thank you so much for everyone sticking around. And if you have any questions, again, check out crema.us. We love taking creativity, technology, and culture and helping individuals and organizations thrive. Nate, thanks for putting all the thought into this and for what you do every day, having basically the same conversation over and over again every day with potential clients at Crema. So if you want to talk more to Nate, his email, nate@crema.us, shoot him an email, and we'd love to answer any questions you have, or if there's any way that we can help you. We'd love to help you explore prototyping your ideas or actually going into building out digital products that can move your business. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, George.
It's good to see you guys.